First of all, I would have wanted to begin with an explanation of what philosophy is, beginning with the most commonplace points. For instance, that the word philosophy means the study of wisdom. And wisdom here does not simply mean prudence in practical life, but rather a perfect knowledge of everything a human being can know. Thus, Descartes wrote in the preface to his book Principles of Philosophy, which is today's subject. So welcome everyone to this episode of Sound and Sophia. The Principles of Philosophy is a rather short book. It contains merely 76 principles that one should follow if one is to engage in philosophy. In his previous books, like the Meditations and the Discourse on Method, Descartes laid down the foundation for all science as he saw it. And here he laid down the foundation, principles of philosophy. I would say that some of these principles are good, some are bad, like most things in life. Of course, I won't go through all of these 76 principles. If one could die of boredom, that would probably do the trick. But I'll try to highlight some principles that I like and some that are important for Descartes' philosophy. So here comes the first one. The seeker after truth must once in his life doubt everything as far as possible. Of course, this is the first principle, since it is the very basis of Descartes' own philosophy. But I do think he has a point. Because when we're kids, we're basically put into an institution that is made to make us into acceptable individuals in society. Schools. And in the schools we're taught a set of beliefs, knowledge that might be false, morals, etc., etc. I'm not against schools or anything, because in order for us to doubt everything, we must have knowledge to begin with, right? And it's not just the schools that molds us, but society at large. So I really think it's a good idea to try to raise oneself above one's own time and society, and doubt everything that is possible to doubt. Some skepticism is just healthy, but not too much. 6. We have free will, so as to be able to refrain from assenting to what is doubtful and thus to avoid error. But in the meantime, whatever is the source of our being, and however powerful and deceptive it is, we nonetheless know by experience that we have freedom, so that we can always abstain from believing in whatever is not fully certain and properly investigated, and thus we can take care never to be mistaken. So freedom of will is important for Descartes. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. 21. The continuation of our own existence suffices to demonstrate the existence of God. As I've said many times during this series on Descartes, the existence of God is paramount. So here is just another proof of God's existence. But I thought it was a little bit more interesting since I've been reading up a little bit on the philosophy of time. Time certainly is a mysterious thing. Does the future and the past exist in any way? Or is the present the sole entity of existence? And how does things persist through time? Or do they persist through time? And this issue of persistence through time, Descartes uses as an argument for God's existence. Because as he saw it, there is nothing within us that has the power to preserve us. But it seems as though I am the same man that I was yesterday that I am today. So there must be something that preserves me through time. But there's no power within me to do that. So the power that preserves me must be distinct from myself, and that power must be able to preserve itself, and that has to be God. So what did Descartes think about the freedom of will? Okay, here he writes. 39. The freedom of the will is self-evident. 40. It is certain that all things have been preordained by God. Well, that certainly sounds contradictory, doesn't it? But okay, he continues here. How the freedom of our will and divine preordination can be reconciled. So Descartes claims that we have freedom of will, and that we've already demonstrated it when we rejected all the knowledge that wasn't clear and distinct. But still, God preordains everything. Really? How does he reconcile these two principles? Well, the argument he lays out next is a very weird argument. I really feel that he's trying to have the cake and eat it too. He wants us to have freedom of will, but still have God in the equation. He says that we are finite beings, and that God is infinite, which means that we cannot comprehend how freedom of will works in a preordained world. Oh well, what do you guys think about this argument? Does it hold? 58. Number and all universals are only modes of thought. Here Descartes argues against the Platonist view of universals. What is a universal, one might ask? Well, in short, let's talk about cubes.
A cube can be big, small, purple, orange, smelly. Ugh. But all of these cubes have something in common, according to Plato. They are all part of the universal of cubes.
But Descartes thinks this is wrong on a fundamental level. Because if you remember in the last episode, the only essential property of matter is to be extended in space. So being a cube or being smelly or purple is just different modes of matter. And what we call universals are just different ways for our mind to organize the world. Here he writes, universals are formed purely from this, that we use one and the same idea in thinking about all individuals that resemble one another. I think that'll do for this episode. There sure is way more that we could talk about in this book, but Descartes is an expert on repeating himself. There's a lot of principles that express the very same ideas that he had already written about in the Discourse on Method and the Meditations. So I think that'll do. So the next episode will talk about the passions of the soul, which will be the very last episode in this series on Descartes. So take care until that one.